afternoon, or good morning, depending on your location. My name is Christine Richards, and I'm Z-Prime's Research Director, as well as the moderator for today's event. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is called A Neighborhood View, Opportunities for Targeted Demand Response, which is presented by Converge. Today we'll be hearing a little bit more about some opportunities utilities have to really start to take their demand response to the next level. And we'll be hearing from thought leaders with Converge, Central Hudson Gas and Electric, and Con Edison to help us understand a little bit more about those areas. Now, as far as the flow of the event, I'll be doing some quick opening comments. Our presenters are going to share their insights, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Now, before we dive in, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce our speakers. First, we'll have Steve Hambrick, who is the Senior Vice President with Converge, and he'll be talking a little bit about demand response at the more macro level, talking about those trends that we're seeing and changes that are coming. And then we'll hear from Amanda Zuccato, the Director of Energy Efficiency and Demand Response at Central Hudson Gas and Electric, and Sim Zerkiev, the Manager of Demand Response Programs at Con Edison. And they'll both be taking a little bit of time to talk about the demand response efforts at their utilities. And again, my name is Christine Richards, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. So before I turn things over to Steve, I just wanted to take a couple slides to remind people about the importance of demand response and how we view customer participation in demand response. Now, as we know, demand response, it's been around for a while now, but it's still really a key effort for so many utilities. This slide here shows some data from a recent Infrastructure Innovation Series report that focuses on investor-owned utility efforts in essentially building this next generation infrastructure we've been talking about. Now, we asked study participants, what are your top 3 smart grid application priorities? And you can see here that demand response ranks right up there at the top. Data analytics, distribution automation, demand response, all these areas are really important for utilities right now. And not only is demand response important, but we expect it to continue to increase in importance for utilities. Now, when considering different smart grid efforts, there's always that question of what is driving utilities to invest in these areas. And I thought this slide was really interesting. Again, I asked people to rank their top 3, and in this case, it's benefit. Now, you can see here that even above reduction in restoration time and improved power quality, we have the customer right there at the top, as well as the integration of distributed resources. Now, we're really hearing so much about customers in the industry today, which is definitely a great thing. But it's often either about customers as individuals, or kind of customers as a whole. And what we're finding is that really driving customer benefits that we want to achieve from a lot of these different efforts requires more than just those 2 viewpoints. It's important to understand essentially that middle ground between the individual customer and every customer. And that's that neighborhood view, or more local view of customers. We found that by looking at understanding the grid at that more neighborhood level, it's really an opportunity to target customers and target resources where they're most needed. Whether it's areas with aging assets or high energy demands, high EV penetration. Understanding those neighborhood trends are really important. And that's where we're really going to be focusing our discussion today. So before I turn things over to Steve and the rest of the speakers, I want to let you know that we want you to ask questions as they come up during these presentations. And then we'll take some time at the end of the webinar to have Steve, Amanda, and Sim answer your questions. Okay. So now we can really get on to the good stuff, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve to get things started. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
This is a fun topic to talk about because as was alluded to earlier, this is really something where everyone wins, not just the program participants, but all customers and the utilities and regulators, and as I'll get to in a bit, even utility investors. So a quick overview of Converge. I think in the context of this opportunity, a really important point to make is that the perspective I'm sharing on both the feasibility and the cost effectiveness of non-wires alternatives comes from almost 3 decades of experience delivering DER solutions. And not just delivering these solutions, but doing it in a pay-per-performance fashion where Converge has risked our own capital to commit to load reductions lasting for a decade or more. I think that's a really important point, that these solutions have to meet their goal and sustain that goal in order to defer the capital investment. I'm going to jump to the next slide. Sorry, I didn't know I had control. So I wanted to give a quick intro into traditional demand management versus what we're calling targeted demand management. And we're all familiar with traditional system-level DR. And internally we talk about it like the big red button that utilities hit 6 to 10 times a summer to reduce overall system load. And that's an important resource. But we're seeing a trend towards a more targeted demand management, even in utilities where it makes sense to have both solutions existing concurrently. The targeted demand management we're talking about today focuses a DER resource in specific zones to achieve some kind of a critical operational outcome, usually deferring investment distribution architecture. I've stole the visuals in this slide from Central Hudson, so Amanda's going to cover this specific program in more detail later. But even though we're seeing a trend towards more targeted demand management and more precise DR, there continues to be applications where system-wide DR is an important resource. And I think the important upside we see is that these two can coexist. So I can offer different incentives and different marketing strategies for the overall system program versus specific zones where I need potentially a different resource mix and a different level of penetration in those zones. And Central Hudson is again a great example of that. I want to again make the point that with targeted demand management opportunities, there's no award for second place. We've got to get all the way there. We need to completely meet our goals and then sustain that load of reduction so the utility is able to fully defer or avoid making that capital investment. If we don't get all the way there, then not only have we made the investment in the DER solution, but now the utility may have to go back and ultimately make that investment in distribution infrastructure. So that would be the worst possible outcome. So when we're considering these TDM solutions, we need to make sure that the assumptions and the expertise that goes into scaling this are drawn from experience and made to scale and made to be sustained through time. So non-wires alternatives have been around for a while, but we're seeing a really dramatic acceleration for targeted demand management in the marketplace. And I would argue that there's 3 core reasons for why this market is expanding. Number one, we're seeing lower overall system load growth in many parts of the country under 1%, which can lessen the need for system-level DR. But in conjunction with that lower system-level growth, we're seeing localized growth, much higher, 2, 3, 5%. Now, but at the same time, the demand curves are changing from a less predictable path to a more, sharper peaks, split peaks, and moving peaks. So while overall load growth may be dropping in most areas, it is increasing in, I would say that the pace of growth is slowing. I want to be precise in that. in many areas. There's still areas of localized growth, and then peaks are becoming sharper and more fluid, which again creates opportunities for targeted demand management. The second thing is that while new DER technology is contributing to some of these changing demand curves and moving peaks, they're also creating an opportunity for utilities to better control load, even in largely residential areas. So we have more resources that are viable load reduction or load modifying resources behind the meter that we can deploy. So that's a huge opportunity for us. And then finally, and my belief is that this is the most important barrier that is becoming overcome, is that there's regulatory reform that's enabling utilities to share in the benefits and encourage utilities to find these solutions. And I believe that this is the more important, the important barrier for us to continue to overcome, because we have sufficient technology to do really compelling things with targeted deployment of DERs, but we need to make it strategically important for the utilities. So this isn't just a regulatory compliance issue or something that they're compelled to do by a commission, but something that's really strategically important to utilities and their shareholders. And opportunities from the policy reform will do that. And when it becomes compelling for the utility, as I mentioned, the technology is proven and it's there, we can find a lot more DER solutions than are currently being delivered in the marketplace. So this is a complex chart, but I wanted to talk about what makes a successful TDM solution. And this is certainly not an all-size-fits-all universe, but the short answer is that it's the kitchen sink. In order to solve these really challenging problems in constrained areas, we need to not limit ourselves to one resource type or one technology. So it's ultimately not going to be just demand response, but other tools like energy efficiency and ultimately distributed generation and storage, all deployed in a targeted fashion, because all these resources have various strengths and weaknesses, and we need to deploy them to take advantage of their strengths and protect their weaknesses in these targeted zones to ultimately deliver the outcome the utility and the grid needs. So I'm sure Amanda will talk more about the Central Hudson solution, but it's a great example of where we're targeting all customer classes: large C&I, small commercial, residential multifamily, and going after multiple sources of load as well. Ag pumps, air conditioners, pool pumps, and obviously lots of other commercial and industrial opportunities. And we also think that there needs to be choice for the customer in terms of how they participate in the program. That if the program is too restrictive, we're going to lose customers that would otherwise participate. And when we're driving towards high penetration in these targeted zones, we don't want to make it hard for customers or discourage any potential participants. So we encourage looking at direct install, trade channels, customer install, using tools like energy marketplaces. These are all great ways to get devices behind the meter that we can control and have participate in the program. The final point is, the program design in terms of incentive and marketing is absolutely critical as well. It's got to be, the incentives have to be compelling enough to get not just the early adopters, which I think is something we've seen a lot in the industry of very small-scale programs, small-scale BYOD only programs that may get 1 or 2% market penetration, but we need to get deep into that late majority. So we need compelling incentives and a multi-channel marketing effort to go out and attract those customers and keep them in the program. I have one last slide I wanted to talk about, and this is a common myth I've heard perpetuated, that ultimately the vast majority of customers won't adopt installed measures. And I've seen people saying that only 5% or 10% of residential customers will participate in a device-based demand-side management program. And I just wanted to use this forum to say that is absolutely not the case. Again, with the right program design and marketing campaign, we've been north of 60%, as you can see at PEPCO, and that's at a very large scale. 370,000 premises and over 450,000 devices. Similar result at SMECO. So wanted to really highlight that with the right program design, DERs do have a very high potential. So the potential for us to find DER solutions as an alternative to distribution investments is higher than a lot of folks in the market give it credit for. And in Central Hudson, I'm about to transition to Amanda. We're targeting over 50% market penetration in the residential of residential customers of central air conditioners, and we're doing it on a pay-per-performance basis. So we've signed up, and we're putting our own skin in the game because we're that confident that we can achieve these levels of participation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amanda.
Do I have control now? Sorry, everybody. Let me move my slide. Okay, that's better. My name is Amanda Ciccato, and I'm the Director of Energy Efficiency and Demand Response at Central Hudson. And my responsibility is managing Central Hudson's energy efficiency portfolio for both residential and commercial customers, as well as the implementation of our demand response programs. Just to give a quick background about Central Hudson, we are located in the mid-Hudson Valley region of New York State. Our service territory covers the southern tip of Albany County and just north of Westchester County. Our main headquarters is located in Poughkeepsie, New York, about 100 miles north of New York City. We have about 300,000 electric customers and 78,000 gas customers. So today I'm going to be speaking about the demand response programs that we are currently implementing with Converge. And just to note, this is the first time that Central Hudson has implemented any demand response programs. So at Central Hudson, Steve talked about customer engagement with demand response as new ways of getting customers involved with their local utility. We're embarking on a new level of customer engagement at Central Hudson. We have developed new tools for customers to utilize that I will speak a little bit of later. The umbrella brand is called Send Hub, which is really the hub for customers to use to gain additional insight on their energy usage and then take action. Under the umbrella brand Send Hub, we have coined the term Peak Perks, and Peak Perks is specifically referring to the targeted demand response program we currently have underway with Converge. So as I said before, we're currently implementing the demand management program with Converge in 3 specific areas of our service territory that have a capacity need due to load growth. And I'll talk a little bit about, so concurrently we are running a system-wide demand response program with Converge as well as the specific targeted areas, and they each have different needs. And in the targeted areas, by implementing these programs, we are deferring specific capital investment projects out 5 to 10 years. The deferral of these projects results in a more efficient T&D system while providing savings for all customers. And we've actually proposed a new savings incentive that I will discuss a little bit later, but it's an incentive and savings for the customer as well as Central Hudson. This project really demonstrates the benefits of locational value of D pricing for DERs, as Steve mentioned. So we're deploying different behind-the-meter DERs to really gain the capacity that we need in these areas. And this really ties back to the REV initiative in New York State, trying to quantify the full range of additional values provided by this distribution level resource. This program is labeled as Central Hudson's Non-Wires Alternative, or NWA. Just to give a background, all New York State utilities were required to develop a non-wires alternative project. So as I said before, the implementation of this program is deferring required capital investment while testing customer engagement and choice by deploying several end-use devices, such as thermostats, direct load control switches, as well as utilizing capacity savings from water heaters and pool pumps, and then ag pumps on the commercial and C&I side. So as I said before, we have deployed two types of program based on different needs, a targeted program as well as a system-wide program. So all the New York State utilities were ordered to implement a system-wide demand reduction program. In Central Hudson service territory, we have minimal growth, and the primary need for capital infrastructure is due to the age of equipment, not load growth. So we don't really have a huge benefit for Central Hudson or for customers in the system-wide, we call it our DLM program, Dynamic Load Management. The PEAKS program, on the other hand, our targeted program, has a larger average peak demand growth, and these capital projects are monetized to fund this program. The analysis that was done that showed deploying these resources in the field through demand response is a much lower cost than moving forward with the infrastructure upgrades. As a result of this project displaying a large savings, dollars-wise, in terms of the traditional T&D investment, and participants in this program are receiving a Hansen benefit. So Steve displayed this map previously, but this displays the three specific areas we're deploying the behind-the-meter devices. So we have the three specific areas. One of the areas is the most northern part of our service territory, where we had infrastructure needs that were needed by the year 2019, and by doing this project, we're deferring them out 10 years. We need 10 megawatts. The other two sections of the service territory, more towards the southern section, we need a total of 6 megawatts, and these projects will be deferred out 5 to 7 years respectively, with a capacity need of 2020. We have milestones in place to track the installation of the capacity assets in order to ensure we are on track to meet the system needs. Our first milestone is in December of 2016 in the Fishkill area of 2 megawatts. So a few pieces of information on the customer demographics. The combined three territories are mostly residential, but we will be getting quite a bit of load reduction from the C&I side as well. A huge challenge that was identified in a residential saturation survey done back in 2013 showed that only 32% of our customers utilize central air conditioning as their primary means of cooling. The only way you can participate in this program as a residential customer is if you have central air, so that's quite a challenge in this program. While looking at each of these areas, each area has a much different load curve. While the Northwest has a peak that is much longer in duration in terms of hours, comparing to Fishkill, which has a much more concentrated peak. So each area has to be deployed differently. And as I said before, milestones were set in place for a couple of reasons. Obviously, to track program success, but we are working closely with our engineering folks to make sure that the capacity will be there when needed. If the milestones are not hit, we must move forward with the upgrades due to the time it takes to procure materials and permits for large capital projects. And as I mentioned before, this utility incentive, which we propose, is based on the delta of savings between this project, the capital investments, and the deployed DR resources. We actually propose that customers, as well as Central Hudson, should receive a benefit. We propose to the Public Service Commission a 50% savings mechanism. So the savings realized from this program, 50% of those savings will be passed on to customers, and Central Hudson will earn 50% of those savings as well. So the program key factors when designing this program, we looked at the unique load shape of each area, as I said, and each zone is very different, some peaking early and some have an extended peak. So for the program design, we really wanted to leverage each of the technologies that we are harnessing to decrease the load. We had to make sure that we were getting the proper amount of participation to meet these goals. As Steve said, we needed enough customers over 50% to secure the capacity needs in these areas. So each residential participant gets a free thermostat worth $185, free installation, $85 to sign up, and then a $50 annual retention reward. As compared to the DLM or system-wide program, customers are only getting a $25 annual reward. They're not getting a free thermostat, free installation, or a sign-up fee. So there's really not as much benefit due to really our load is, not really growing in the system at all, system-wide. So there are additional incentives, as I said before. So you have the sign-up incentive, the thermostat incentive, and there's additional incentives if customers also allow us to curtail load from their water heater and pool pumps. So talking about coordinating with other SendHub programs, as I said before, SendHub is really the hub for customers to come and learn more about their energy usage and then also take action. So Central Hudson, as part of SendHub, also has a store in which customers can create an account and then log on and purchase things for their homes, such as LEDs and thermostats, and receive an energy efficiency rebate. So tying in this program with energy efficiency incentives as well, for every successful enrollment in this program, we are providing Peak Perks customers with a coupon to receive 6 free LEDs from the SendHub store. So here we are incentivizing people to sign up for Peak Perks, which already has, a pretty hefty benefit already, while engaging customers to get on our new engagement portal, providing them free LEDs, which also in turn, allows us to capture additional energy efficiency benefits. So talking about participant recruitment, in order for this program to be successful, as everyone knows, heavy but strategic marketing is crucial. So we're engaging customers in several ways. Outbound calling has been our most successful way of getting customers into the program. We will also be deploying door-to-door forces as well. So again, this program focuses on deploying these devices in the field in order to have the assets if and when we need to call on them, while also testing a level of increased customer engagement with Central Hudson. So that's all I had. I'm going to pass it off to Sim.
It sounds like Sim might be on mute, so there we go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. My name is Sim Zirkiyev. I manage the commercial demand response programs here at Con Edison. I'll start off with a quick overview about Con Edison, then transition to talk about our current demand response program offerings, and then transition to talk about the targeted demand management efforts that we have undertaken in a specific area on the border of Brooklyn and Queens. So Con Edison has been the utility serving New York City and Westchester. We have 3.3 million electric customers, 1.1 million gas customers, and we also have a district steam system in the borough of Manhattan. Part of Con Edison's family include Orange and Rockland utilities, which provide gas and electric service in Orange and Rockland County, just near Westchester. Con Edison Development, which actually has over 1,000 megawatts of utility-scale solar in various stages of development or in operation. So there is a typo on this slide. And Con Edison Transmission, which is the newest member of the Con Edison family, which owns and operates, which invests in electric and gas transmission systems. We currently offer 2 commercial demand response programs, and also we have some offerings on the residential side. As far as commercial demand response, we have a 2-hour notification program which is intended to relieve specific contingencies on the distribution system. So this program has been around since 2001 and has been a very unique program when it started, in that it really kind of was a targeted demand response program when it started back then. It's deployed on a specific network basis. Con Edison service territory includes 84 specific networks. So if any one of them has a contingency, we deploy demand response resources in that specific location. And the resources are expected to respond within 2 hours or less. The next program we have is the 21-hour notification program. That has been, the purpose of that program is to shave the peak of the specific distribution areas. So again, another targeted kind of the program has been in existence for about 6 years now, and it is the events in that program are initiated if the next day's system-wide forecasted peak is at least 92% of the summer forecast for that current season. So just I wanted to also add that as far as the challenges with the current programs, because the resources are aggregated by network as opposed to being aggregated system-wide, the reliability of performance may vary depending on the network and depending on when events are called in that network. So the fact that performance is not as predictable as we would like to be is certainly a challenge for us, and we have been doing some, making some program modifications to improve performance. Namely, we've increased incentive payments in the last few years in both programs to kind of offer a bigger carrot to participants to incentivize them to perform. Another challenge is that the stability of incentive levels is important not only for the customers, but it's also for Con Edison. So for customers, it's important for incentive levels to be stable, for them to know whether to make investments into DR enablement technologies. And ultimately for Con Edison, it's important so that we can rely on these customers returning from year to year. Now, as far as on the residential program side, we do have a DLC program, the direct load control program that's been in existence also since early 2000s. We have about 30 megawatts of callable demand response there, about 20,000 customers. Under that program, basically customers receive a free thermostat. The program uses paging technology, and can be called either for reliability, to improve reliability in specific networks, or when we initiate our 21-hour notification program. A new offering is what we call the Bring Your Own Thermostat program. That is similar to the direct load control program, except the thermostats here you rely on Wi-Fi, on the Wi-Fi connection to communicate with us. We have about 4.6 megawatts in that program, almost 3,000 customers. And under that program, customers that purchase a qualifying Wi-Fi thermostat receive an $85 rebate, and there are additional annual incentives. Just I wanted to give an overview on the history, a quick overview on the history of demand response programs here at Con Edison. This chart shows the historic enrollment levels for our programs. The blue is the 2-hour notification program, and the red is the peak load shaving 21-hour notification program. You might notice that enrollment levels in the contingency, in the 2-hour notification program, were relatively low up to 2006, and then kind of jumped up starting in 2007. That was caused by the Public Service Commission's order to include aggregators and also incorporate a capacity payments, make participation mandatory essentially. Those two factors kind of the transition from this being a purely voluntary program and plus the inclusion of aggregators helped to drive the enrollments up. Then in 2013, enrollments dropped because of as a result of Hurricane Sandy. A lot of buildings just needed to focus on recovering from that. And in 2014, we increased our incentives substantially for both programs, which helped kind of to reignite enrollments. And in 2016, we removed the penalty in the peak shaving program, which substantially drove the enrollments up in that program. The reason we kind of removed the penalty, we still was we were trying to what we found is that the current levels of enrollment are relatively low, considering that the system-wide peak for our service territory is about 13,000 megawatts. So the idea here is to try to grow enrollments to make these programs more effective from an operational and economic standpoint. So now I'd like to transition to kind of talk about our newest effort. This shows a map, the location of this of the targeted demand management program that we've undertaken 2 years ago in the area that's at the border of Brooklyn and Queens. We call it the Brooklyn-Queens Demand Management Program. So 2 years ago, as the discussions for REV were just beginning, Con Edison was looking to take the lead and apply the REV concepts to this targeted location that was projected to have a subtransmission feeder constraint. Because of the demographics of the area and because we had experience implementing various solutions to reduce demand, at that time we decided that the optimal approach would be to incorporate a portfolio of resources and not rely only on demand response. We worked closely with the engineers and the planners to clearly identify the need. It helped that our department is within the umbrella of electric operations group, which includes the planning and engineering teams. Demand management departments and other utilities tend to be grouped within other teams, such as customer operations, and that may not help them to be incorporated in the planning process. After identifying a need, we put forward this Brooklyn-Queens Demand Management Program, and this program is unique as compared to other similar initiatives in several respects. First, it incorporates a portfolio approach of the distributed energy resource solutions. So it includes not only demand response, but also fuel cell, energy efficiency, and solar installations. Secondly, because this project defers the investment in the traditional solution, it is treated as a regulatory asset by our regulator. And as such, Edison is allowed to earn an approved rate of return. And finally, demand response will be procured in this program instead of being procured using a traditional approach of an administratively set incentive. Here, we're going to be procuring DR using a forward capacity descending clock auction. So now to address the challenges that I mentioned earlier, the two challenges, we've modified the demand response rules for this program. Specifically, to address the challenge of improving reliability of performance, we're incorporating penalties in this program for demand response, and also a bonus payment mechanism to incentivize participants to stick to their pledged enrollment levels. To address the challenge of incentive certainty, we are conducting the auctions for 2017 and 18 in the end of July. So just some more information on this descending clock auction. We'll be conducting 4 auctions. Two auctions would be for 2 4-hour intervals in 2017, and 2 more auctions will be for 2 4-hour intervals in 2018. All 4 auctions will be conducted on July 27th and 28th of next month. The idea now behind the descending clock auction is that the ceiling price is public, and it's a significant amount. If I recall, it's $1,200 per kilowatt per year. So the idea is to use this high ceiling price to attract as many participants as possible to participate in the auction. But the participants will not know the specific need for demand response. So they'll be incentivized to pledge as many megawatts as possible at the price that is being auctioned. And as the bids come in during the auction itself, we will be able to see how many megawatts in all are coming in. And assuming that that figure exceeds the need, we will then be able to lower the offering price below the ceiling price and let the market offer their megawatt levels again at the new price. And this would go on continuously for about 2 hours until we get down to the needed megawatts, and that would be at the clearing price. Okay. So that really concludes my talk. If you want more information on our programs, these are the 2 websites. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim. That was great. So now we're going to open things up, and it's your turn to ask us any questions about what you've heard today. And just to start things off, I have a few questions that came in for both Sim and Amanda on your specific program. So we'll take a couple of minutes here to go through those, and then definitely had some great questions on broader trends that we're seeing in demand response and demand management, and we can get to those. So for Amanda, for you first, the question came in that was around some of the interaction that people can have with the technology. So the question that we got was, does Central Hudson open its application program interface, or API, to techie geeks so they can write their own code or programs to control or manage in-home technologies? Or is that pretty much something that's controlled by Central Hudson?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That's pretty much locked down, controlled by Central Hudson, and one of the key reasons for that is customer data. And I know that, the person asking or the reason isn't, I'm sure they wouldn't want access to customer data, but just having the level of, bulletproof protection of our customer data is an utmost priority. So anyone that touches anything within our internal system, would have to, go through several cybersecurity questionnaires to make sure that they, also have the same level of scrutiny. We do work with a lot of outside IT folks. So if someone has a great idea, I don't know if my contact information will be made available, but I'm definitely open to hearing if someone has a cool idea to implement.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's always that balance of, giving people access to their information and being able to manage it, but also, the security piece is huge, so excellent. And another question we got for you, Amanda, was how does the deferral of the capital projects affect the reliability of your service?
So the deferral, so the question is, how does the deferral, we are able to serve, so the demand response that we're doing in that area is able to serve a larger load than the more concentrated areas where the infrastructure replacement would be. So by bringing, and then another point, bringing the load down in those areas relieves some of the, tension, so to speak, on those capacity-strained circuits. So, high level speaking, doing the demand response in these areas creates a more efficient and resilient grid in those areas.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Okay, and Sim, we had a few questions come in for you as well. So one person had a question around, it was towards the beginning of your presentation, you had the 2-hour and 21-hour notification programs. And this participant had the question, are you allowed to capitalize the costs associated with those programs?
So, if I understand correctly, the question is whether we as a utility earn a return based on those programs?
Yeah, if you're allowed to, capitalize the cost and earn a rate of return on the investment.
Currently, the answer is no. Now, in the latest, now that may change in the foreseeable future. So we're looking, we're looking for the best. The best proposal we can issue to the Public Service Commission to change that.
Okay. Now, there was another question that came in too on slide 23, so I'm going to jump back to that really quickly. So megawatts enrolled in commercial demand response. The question was, are the peak shaving numbers and the contingency demand response, are they coincident? So if the question was, would I add these together, or is it one or the other?
So
does that make sense?
Yes, that's a very good question, a very common question we get. The answer is a lot of these megawatts are overlapping. Now, we still show them separately because they could be called at different times. So a given customer may participate in both programs, and the customer would understand that if a peak shaving event is called, which normally lasts for 4 hours, there could be a chance that a contingency event may be called either at an overlapping time or before the peak shaving or after peak shaving. So the customer might need to be able to respond for more than 4 hours to satisfy the demands of both programs.
Okay, excellent. Perfect. All right, so we had just some broader questions, and some of these came in for you, Steve. So I'll pick on you first for a couple of them, and then we can open it up to Amanda and Sim as well. So question for you, Steve, was are you seeing demand management as load control or generational control or both?
It's interesting. I think there are different people in the industry with a different perspective, but I think for us it's a load modifying resource.
Okay. And Amanda and Sim, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that question?
I would agree with that. Using it as a distribution level resource, for sure, a load control resource.
Yes, I would agree with that too. Using it as a load modifying resource to ultimately optimize the infrastructure, the utility infrastructure.
Excellent. And then, Steve, a question that had come in for you is, what is the list of criteria to use for, redrawing the map into smaller demand areas? An example was given of, targeting high-density solar users. So, any insights you could share around some of those considerations for people, looking to kind of better hone their demand response efforts? What would be a part of that list of considerations?
It's a really interesting question. With our DRMS and I think all the leading enterprise DRMS systems, there's really no limit into how finite you could break down the topology of the network. So you could get granular down to the household level if you really wanted to in terms of calling events. But your question is how do you balance granularity versus what's meaningful and practical? And when you look at these targeted zones, like Amanda broke down the 3 zones in Central Hudson, ultimately you want to have different offers. There's different values that you put out in the marketplace, and it's important to avoid customer confusion, because as you get down to programs, you can have a person on one side of the street maybe being offered one incentive and a person on the other side of the street being offered a different incentive. So I think from a programmatic perspective, you've got to limit the complexity and the number of offers that are available. But from the way that the resources can be managed and deployed, that really can be at a household level of granularity, and frankly, even with different devices in the household being managed differently, which is something that we do very often today. So speaking out of both sides of my mouth, I think from a program design perspective, we got to focus on the differences that really matter, and not at the expense of customer confusion. But from an operational perspective, we can go, and I think most modern DRMSs can go as granular as the utility would like us to.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point around balancing that granularity versus what's meaningful and practical for the utilities and customers. Now, Amanda, how does Central Hudson approach that in terms of, determining some of those key factors? What are some of the things that you're looking at, or, looking into the future, what are some of the considerations that you have in terms of that granularity factors?
So I guess in terms of granularity, but really at a high level in terms of going forward with a project at all, the first thing we do is, the analysis to see what is the cost of the traditional T&D infrastructure versus the cost of deploying, DR resources in the field, and is the timeline feasible for getting the capacity in place when it's needed, because these larger projects take quite a long time to procure resources, permits, engineering time. So really the biggest factor for us is it feasible, first of all, from a customer mix perception and perspective. So, like I talked about before, the challenge with us is penetration of central air conditioners, and we have a tight timeline too, as Steve knows. So, looking at the project from a very high level, is the timeline feasible? Is the customer mix, what type of marketing do we have to do to get the resources in place and retain those resources? So that really looking at it, and is there a defined benefit for customers at the end of the day?
Yeah, really. The benefits, like we talked about. It all comes back to the customer. And Sim, what are you seeing? What are some of the factors that you consider, or when building these programs, what are you looking at?
Right. So very similar to what Amanda indicated. It all starts off with benefit cost analysis, and as well as the schedule. Is the constraint forecasted to be next year? How big is the constraint? Where is it located? The calculus there would be very different from whether the constraint is forecasted to be 5 years from now. The primary driver for identifying the location of DERs, where DERs will be implemented, is the electrical location of the constraint, really. So.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, a lot of different factors to consider. So we have just a minute or two here left. So to close things out, I just wanted to ask each of you to give your top piece of advice. So demand response, demand management. It's going on at a lot of utilities, and it sounds like there are a lot of opportunities to change. So what's a piece of advice you would give to one of your peers about how do you go about making a change and continuing to evolve your DR programs? What's the best thing that a utility company could be doing? So I'll pick on Sim first for that one.
Okay. Probably the best advice for specifically for a utility that hasn't had any DR programs at all would be to start small. Probably to starting with a targeted area maybe ideal. So that if you make any mistakes, you're not impacting the entire system. Typically, and as the programs, as you continue operating the programs, keep identifying any areas for improvement by serving customers, serving your participants, and reaching out to other utilities to learn about the best practices.
Yeah, and that's great advice. How about you, Amanda?
So I would say, at the end of the day, you deploy these resources, but they're only as good as, the customer continuing to participate. So one thing I would really, give as an advice is really have your customer service buttoned up. Whether it's your processes within your call center, your outside staff, your inside staff, with our C&I programs, making sure our Central Hudson employees that have relationships with these larger C&I customers, make sure everyone is on the same page, because at the end of the day, your customers are what is making this program successful, along with, great marketing, but we need to make sure that the incentives are good enough so that customers are there when we call on them. So definitely making sure you have processes in place so that your customer service is top-notch.
Absolutely. And Steve, last words.
I think when you're defining an opportunity for demand response or other demand management solutions, I think it's important to focus on the outcome that's most important, because there's a lot of different vendors and a lot of different technologies that all have different approaches and methodologies to reach those outcomes. And it's better to let them solve for your outcome the best way possible versus trying to prescribe what features and functions they use to achieve that outcome. So that would be my advice to not just utilities new to DR or DSM, but any utility is focus on the outcome that's most important to you, and let vendors compete with different solutions.
Sounds like good advice. So that's all the time we have for today. We had a lot of other questions come in, and we'll be sending those along to our presenters so they can see it, and we will try to get back to you with as many answers as we can. So, again, thank you so much, Amanda, Sim, and Steve, for taking the time to chat with us today. We really appreciate it. And as a quick reminder, everyone attending today's webinar, you will receive an email within the next couple of days with links to the webinar presentation deck as well as the audio file. So thank you again to Converge for supporting this webinar, and from all of us at C-Prime, thank you for being a part of it. And we hope you have a wonderful Tuesday.